Good morning, everyone. This is episode 3 of my still to be named podcast. Today we will be talking about the live action Moana film. But before that, we're going to go back to our movie news segment and talk about a couple news stories from the past week that I thought were notable or interesting to talk about. So, kind of starting back with some of the news covered and reviews covered last week, we got the Minions and Monsters box office. So, Deadline's reporting that it got 61 million in the opening 5 days. Definitely not as strong as they would have liked. However, I looked at it currently on Box Office Mojo, and the current numbers are tracking 187 million for worldwide and 87 million for domestic, which for a movie that cost 85 million to make, as we talked about last week, isn't terrible. It's not maybe the, home run they were hoping for when they made this movie, but those are still pretty good numbers. They're not like losing a ton of money on this. I know they have to make up for print and advertising as well, but it looks like it's still making a lot of money and it'll still be relatively successful. I do think we're coming out of a decade where we had Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame and all these massive movies, and it was common to see things go over 1 billion in sales frequently, and we're no longer in that era. Definitely smaller budgets are needed these days in order to make a profit, and I think that's actually a good thing. Right back in the early 2000s, up to like around 2010ish, there was all these different kinds of movies made for small budgets targeting specific people groups. Right? Oh, you're a single young person in their 20s, you're going to like this movie. Or you're a mom of 4 and really want some, rom-com, here's this movie for you. They made movies for specific people, and we've talked about this a bit before, but definitely, like, I think that's where the industry needs to go. We had some amazing times, some very unique times in the 2010s where people were making movies that everyone in culture knew about, everyone went and saw, most namely the Marvel movies, right, with ending with Endgame and Infinity War and Endgame. And even these giant animated movies did quite well, and they built franchises and got families out, and people love these movies. But Supergirl, didn't live up to box office hype. Minions and Monsters not quite living up to that hype. I believe even Moana is not projected to do that well either. And so we're kind of in a new era now toward late 2020s where more and more movies are being made and then not returning the investment that they thought. And we really saw this strongly with things like the Marvels and stuff in the early 2020s, where Marvel and these companies kept trying to make big budget films and hoping to crack that 1 billion. And that's outside of like Spider-Man, maybe a Star Wars movie here and there. It's not really going to happen. And because of that, I'm very glad to see that a lot of studios are shifting to cheaper films to make. Supergirl only cost somewhere in the like 180 million area, and Minions and Monsters only cost 85 million to make. So still big budgets, but they don't have to make nearly as much. Superman last year made like somewhere in the 500 million range, which is pretty good. When you compare it to Infinity War, it looks like a huge failure, but it wasn't. It made good money based on the smaller budget they made it for. And now we're going to get stuff like Clayface, even smaller budget, probably a smaller audience who would even go see that to begin with. And we're going to see that a lot is changing. A lot is going to happen in the movie industry, and I think it's a good thing. I want to see smaller movies made for smaller budgets, more specifically made for different people. We lost the mid-budget movie in the 2010s, and I'm hoping we can regain it in the late 2020s, early 2030s. That would be awesome. So, yes, I know a lot of these news sources, they're projecting, oh, the doom and gloom of these franchises and stuff. And I do think there is some probably wishful thinking from some critics of like, yes, finally superheroes are dead. Finally, these animated franchises are dead. They're probably not dead, but they definitely need to be refocused to target specific people. Comic book movies might become a thing that is really targeted toward comic book fans who are going to like the movie regardless because it's their favorite characters on there. And animated movies may be more targeted towards just kids again, and this is not for a movie that everyone's going to think is just a masterpiece. And hopefully you get some of those masterpieces here and there, but it's not the same thing as the entire culture bending around a specific piece of media. So that is one of the news sources that news stories that I found this week. In other news, and similar kind of going off of last week, Ocean's 11 has now 3 more actors joining the production. So Vicky Krieps is joining, George Mackay, and Omar Sy. And Vicky Krieps definitely the least known of probably the 3 there, but has been Phantom Thread and Old and a recognizable face for sure. George Mackay is definitely a little more famous. 1917 was an amazing movie. It's actually one of my favorite war movies of all time. It's just beautiful, and he does a great job in that movie. He's also recently in The Beast, which is a movie with Léa Seydoux, and he does a great job. I believe he's an American in that, if my memory serves me, and he's just kind of funny. He's a great character. That's a little more niche piece of cinema, but he definitely seems to pick some interesting projects, and this time more pivoting towards the blockbuster. On the other side of that, Omar Sy has been probably known, at least by American audiences. He's French. He's in a movie like The Untouchables, but for American audiences, they probably would most recognize him from things like Jurassic World, where he plays Barry, one of those dinosaur trainers, and in X-Men Days of Future Past, he plays Bishop, the superhero. So definitely another recognizable face. And like I said last week, with these mystery movies, with heist movies, it's really fun to get a bunch of diverse cast of characters, usually a lot of familiar faces, because that is what these movies are about. They're ensemble casts. It's really fun to see people interacting. It's helpful to have more diversity as it allows the audience with these huge casts to more easily distinguish between the characters. And often these characters can tend to be a little more one-dimensional. Like in a mystery movie, you have, oh, this guy's the priest, and you just kind of know going in, oh yeah, he's the priest archetype or whatever. And similarly with Ocean's movies, with heist movies, you kind of have certain groups. Oh, this guy's the hacker, right? And you just know, oh, he's the hacker. If they run into a technical issue, he's the one who's going to fix that. Or this guy's the acrobat, and he's the one who's going to get you out of a tight spot. All these different, roles. And so I think it's super fun that they're getting all these people, a lot of familiar faces. Like I said, we'll see how good the movie ends up being, but I'm sure it's going to be a fun ride nonetheless. So, the Hollywood Reporter was reporting that, and they're now joining, Margot Robbie, Wagner Moura, Monica Barbaro, and Josh Gad, like we talked about last week. So it is shaping up. It's an Ocean's 11 movie. We got to have a big cast, lots of different people. I think it's going to be a fun ride for sure. In other news, Netflix is apparently looking at buying Letterboxd. This news a little less exciting for me. I love Letterboxd. I'm an avid Letterboxd user. Make lists on there, rate movies on there. Part of the cinephile experience for sure. And it's a little concerning seeing a major company like Netflix trying to buy out a movie review website that is also reliant on ads and stuff like that. And now, that being said, I did not realize that Rotten Tomatoes used to be part of NBC and IMDb is currently part of like Amazon. So that's partly why you see all the Amazon Prime ads on IMDb. It's not unusual for this to happen. It's still not ideal either. I really think keeping these really cool fan-focused apps and critic-focused apps separate from the corporations making the art itself is probably the best. So currently, Letterboxd is owned by a company called Tiny. They're a Canadian holding company. They own 60% of the stake, and they got it as of 2023. The co-founders, Matthew Buchanan and Carl von Rando, own the remaining 40%. So, still a lot to be determined. This is early reporting, not very confirmed. Variety did try to reach out and ask, Netflix and Sony and Paramount, all these other companies, like, hey, is this true? What's going on? Because it is more than Netflix. Obviously, the headline title, oh, Netflix is buying this, but Letterboxd is shopping around. There's Sony involved. There's Paramount. There's private equity giants like PPG, and even a venture capital firm owned by Reddit co-creator Alexis Ohanian, and so they're all looking around. Letterboxd has obviously become a huge thing, from just fans using the app to them going to the red carpet and asking, what's your 4 favorite movies? I think that it has very unique branding that really sets it apart from the rest of the apps. In fact, there's nothing like it for books. There's nothing like it for TV shows. Really, Letterboxd is the best logging app on the App Store. And I really wish, books like Goodreads could shape up and make their apps more user-friendly like Letterboxd is. Now, I am a little worried because for a while there, you have all these different apps. Take Instagram versus Facebook, for example. Instagram used to be if you're tired of Facebook being all these random political posts from your uncle or your aunt, join Instagram. It's just photos. That's it. And it can be your close friends, and you get to see what's going on in their life. The original intent of social media, maybe a little more artsy as well. And since then, Instagram and Facebook have continually become closer and closer together, right? Their interfaces are almost interchangeable at this point. They each have the messaging app service. They each have stories. They each have the shorts, So it's a really different age, both owned by Meta, obviously, now. So that Meta buying Instagram, I don't think was the best move, and definitely didn't make it into what people like. It's now become exactly what it was not supposed to be at the beginning, and I really hope that doesn't happen with Netflix. I don't want, if Netflix does buy it, I hope they keep it kind of separate, similar a little bit to Amazon and IMDb, maybe not advertised as heavily, although that's probably going to happen, And I also wonder what would happen to the Letterboxd video store. Recently, obviously, Letterboxd released their Letterboxd video store, where people can, rent movies, usually lesser-known titles, foreign films, some classics from, cinema history. I'm curious what Netflix would want to do with that service, because it is a streaming service. It's kind of more focused, more little video rental agency that's built into Letterboxd. I'm curious how Netflix would absorb that. It'll be interesting to see what Netflix does with Letterboxd, if they do in fact take it over, and how that'll change the look of one of my favorite apps and one of the only really truly kind of good apps, it feels like, left on the App Store. So a Letterboxd rep did come out and say, quote, "As Letterboxd has grown, it's natural there would be interest in what we do next. There's nothing specific for us to share at this time. Any decision about Letterboxd's future would involve the founders." So that is good. It's still very preliminary stages. Obviously, a lot of people are very curious what will happen to their favorite app, and we'll see, especially if Netflix buys it, what that would look like in the future. I really hope that that doesn't happen, and yet if it does, I'm sure someone else will come up with their own app and maybe even try to compete with that. So we will see. Obviously, the Letterboxd user crowd tends to not be a crowd that would tends to be a crowd that would like to support a smaller ownership. And so if Letterboxd did go very corporate, very big, I have a feeling that someone else would make a smaller app, and a lot of Letterboxd users may migrate to that. So we will see. In other news, The End of Oak Street, the new David Robert Mitchell movie, does have a rating, and it got rated PG-13. The MPA says it's rated PG-13 for some strong violent content, bloody images, some strong language, and suggestive material. Why? Why is this PG-13? uh, I was very much looking forward to this movie, especially after I saw there was dinosaurs involved. I like dinosaurs a lot. I love the Jurassic movies, even though recently they've been pretty abysmal. But End of Oak Street looked to be this unique take, this unique look uh, at a dinosaur movie and R-rated, and that's exactly what I think Jurassic the Jurassic Park franchises had needed. You know, we have R-rated superheroes. Deadpool is one of the most popular, makes the most money. He's R-rated. Peacemaker is one of the funniest shows. Just period. It's a superhero show, R-rated. And a lot of those do tend to lean into the comedy, but obviously we have horror history to look on for great R-rated, scary horror, and I would love that for a dinosaur movie. Where's our R-rated Jurassic Park movie? Would love that. And the simple answer is 5-year-old boys like dinosaurs. But my question is, what about the 5-year-old boy in all of us, right? We have all these adults who love these dinosaur movies, have grown up astonished and awed by these movies. And there's that quote in Jurassic Park, like the making them bigger with more teeth, and that's exactly what we want. We want bigger. We want more teeth. Not maybe a mutant, but more violent, more able to scare us in that awestruck way that the first Jurassic Park did. And I was really hoping End of Oak Street might be its own unique thing. Obviously, it's not a Jurassic movie, but it looked to be bringing some scary dinosaur action to us adult fans of Jurassic Park movies and dinosaurs as well. So, World of Real reported that the film does have a Spielberg feel, and that's, quote, no surprise given the film is set in the 80s and now has a safe PG-13 rating, end quote. Yeah, not surprising at all. If they are going for the PG-13 route, they're probably trying to draw in some of those, 5, 6, 7-year-old boys who wouldn't be allowed to go to an R-rated movie. PG-13 obviously is the best rating if you want to get a broad scope of a lot of people. But the last two, at least, of David Robert Mitchell's, It Follows, Under the Silver Lake, very much R-rated movies, very much like horror, suspense. And I was really hoping that this one would be that. Now, that being said, I could do for a good summer blockbuster Spielberg feeling. I know we had a Spielberg movie earlier this year already, but one that felt like that old Spielberg, that wonder, that awe, that's really what people want to see. And if it can capture that, I'm sure it's going to be a great movie. That being said, I still hope someday, please give us our R-rated dinosaur movie. That is what fans want, and I think it would do quite well, especially if you had a decent enough story with it. Really were able to bring in the fear factor and the scariness of those dinosaurs and being hunted down by that. Now, that being said, yes, it's PG-13, but according to that MPA rating, like violent content, bloody images, strong language, some strong language, suggestive material, it sounds like it might be on the line there, like it's PG-13, but close to R. But if it's PG-13, it's going to make more money. So that's what they're trying to do. We'll see. Definitely hoping that we get a great movie. Now, it's been 8 years since Under the Silver Lake, so it's first film in a while. Excited to see David Robert Mitchell back, and I'm excited to go see this later on, and we'll do a review here on this podcast so we can talk about it then. But yes, definitely some surprising news. Now, I will say, I went to, I think, Minions and Monsters last week, and they played The End of Oak Street, and I looked over at my brother and we're like, that's a strange choice, the If Follows director being featured in front of a kids movie. Now that the MPA, rating has come out, less surprised. This makes sense. They're definitely marketing it, the Spielberg magic. Ewan McGregor, Star Wars, Anne Hathaway, marketing it toward families, come out, see this movie. It's going to be a fun time. So makes a lot more sense now why we saw that before a kids movie. Finally, for this news segment, I'd like to talk about the Dune Part 3 trailer that came out this week. Dune is one of my favorite movie franchises right now, and I am super, super excited about this new movie. We're going to see how good it is, but apparently at CinemaCon, a bunch of critics got to see like the first 7 minutes and said it was amazing. And we see that in this trailer. It looks beautiful. It looks action packed. It looks just really unique. And I think if they can pull this off, it goes right in line with Lord of the Rings as one of the best trilogies, if not the best trilogy of all time. And Denis Villeneuve has really put in some hard work here. And it's just amazing. Cinematographer is changed. It used to be Greg Fraser, so I was curious how that was going to look differently. And honestly, this trailer, they've kept the visual style of Dune for sure. I mean, the art direction, obviously, a lot of that hasn't changed. It shouldn't change. It's a trilogy, but Linus Sandgren's like DP work on that movie it looks beautiful. The blues, the dusty browns, the really unique, symmetry, and the way they use light like coming through a wall with unique cutouts in it to kind of illuminate these actors in just unique ways that really makes you fall in love with the world of Arrakis, of Dune, and just this story. It's so epic. It's so amazing. And a lot of people have rightly been comparing it to Lawrence of Arabia. A lot of the shots look almost taken right out of that movie from 1962. And doing a little bit of research, some of it, not the most confirmed. I'd love to understand this more, but there is some sources that suggest Herbert actually based a lot of Paul's story on T. Lawrence from Lawrence of Arabia, and the book Dune came out in 1965, so 3 years after that movie. And Denis Villeneuve himself loves Lawrence of Arabia. He, quote, "I was 19 years old or 18 years old, and I showed up to a projection of Lawrence of Arabia, a new 70 millimeter print in Montreal, and I was alone in the theater." And he goes on to say, "I was a film student at the time, and it changed my life. It's a masterclass of filmmaking, and it still is by far one of my favorite movies." So clearly, this movie is influencing Denis Villeneuve a lot. You can see the comparisons online, the visual style. It looks really interesting, and the cinematographer's done a great job, kind of maybe doing a little bit of his own thing, but continuing on the work of Greg Fraser. Now, Linus Sandgren is a great cinematographer himself. He worked on one of my favorite films, La La Land, a beautiful, romance musical. The cinematography in that looks amazing. And did one of my favorite Bond movies too, No Time to Die. And whether or not you like the story in that, definitely a lot of mixed reviews on that. But the cinematography was quite beautiful. It did look really good. And so you can see he's definitely a artistic guy, and he's bringing that art to this new Dune movie. And the reason Greg Fraser couldn't come back is he's actually working on those 4 Beatles movies. At least that's what Josh Brolin has said. So we will see those movies too when they come out. I'm excited to see Greg Fraser. He's a great cinematographer. But obviously, with the cinematographer change, was curious how it would turn out. It looks like it's going to be amazing. Villeneuve has also said this film is going to be a tonal shift. He's compared the first one to like more contemplative movie, second one to a war movie, and the third one he's saying is like more action-packed, intense. Now that is pretty interesting because I have read Dune Messiah, and I don't really remember a ton of like action-packed scenes. So he may be, drawing on some sources from later books as well to try to wrap up this trilogy. Not really sure how that's all going. Definitely tense political story in Dune Messiah. So I'm excited to see it come to the screen. Honestly, those books, maybe not my favorite read of all time. Very thankful for Frank Herbert to have made those books. But Denis Villeneuve's adaptations of them are just beautiful and really my preferred way to take in this story. In fact, Herbert, the original design was a warning against charismatic leaders. And at the end of the first Dune book, you don't really get that. And supposedly he wrote Messiah kind of to double down on that and say, yeah, if you didn't get it, which maybe I was just blind reading the first book, but if you didn't get it in the first book, now you know for sure Paul is not the good guy of this story. He's not the protagonist like you thought. And he's just a charismatic leader. And I think that's something that Denis Villeneuve did a great job of in Dune 2. I think it was very clear to people leaving Dune 2, oh yes, this guy is not all we made him out to be. He is definitely the villain of the story, and at least to some level, even though you still relate a lot to him as well. So we're going to see how this movie turns out. I am very excited about it. It's definitely my most anticipated movie of the rest of the year. I will be, sitting there in IMAX watching and taking that in. It's going to be amazing. So really excited to see this movie, and that trailer just, amped up the excitement for me. The new characters, Anya Taylor-Joy looks amazing in it. So does Robert Pattinson, the kind of newer or, cameoed in the past, but coming back more as established characters for this third movie. Very excited to see this movie. So that's all I have for this section of the podcast on movie news. We'll be pivoting next to doing a conversation on the live action Moana movie, and then going on to talk about my favorite live action remakes that have been made in the last 15 years or so that they've been really popular. Okay, everyone, got reset up again for part 2 of episode 3. We are going to be talking about the live action Moana movie that I just got to see yesterday. So that was a fun time at the theater. I saw it in IMAX and wanted to talk a little bit about that now. And then we'll be going on to talk about my favorite live action remakes, despite there not being maybe as much merit for them as in my opinion. So live action Moana, a new movie just came out. It's a remake of the 2016 Moana movie, which, in my opinion, is one of the best Disney movies, especially one of the best modern Disney movies. It has some of the best music, best visuals. It is just a really, really fun time. It's one of my favorite, not only favorite Disney movies of the last decade, but one of probably my favorite Disney movies of all time. I love Moana. So obviously when I heard they were doing a live action remake, it's mixed mixed reviews there, but I was excited to go see it anyway. It is something that I very much enjoy and was curious what it was going to be like. So decided to go and then wanted to talk about it here. So Dwayne Johnson's back as Maui. In fact, I believe he's one of the main guys who was trying to push for this to happen in the first place. Definitely big fan of the character Maui, and he was going to come back and play it. And I do think there's a lot of people wondering, is this too soon for a live action remake? I mean, probably ever is too soon. You don't really need these live action remakes. But if you're going to have one, having one where the main actors are still at an age that they can replay some of the characters. Obviously, some of the characters are still voiced, like Tamatoa, so Jermaine Clement came back for that as well. But some of the characters, like Moana themselves, and some of the other characters who were played by or voiced by white actors in the animated one are obviously replaced with people of a more Polynesian ancestry. Makes a lot of sense for this story and to bring it to life. So instead of Alihi Cravalho, I'm going to be maybe butchering some of these names, but I'm going to try. She was the main voice of Moana in the animated one, and she's now played by Catherine Lagaia, maybe? Okay, we're going to try that. I do try to get these pronunciations correct, but, some of them are maybe not so easy for me to get my mind around. But Catherine is the new Moana, and I will say one of the best parts of the movie is her embodiment of the role. I think they cast her, at least visually, she looks perfect for the role and really fits the Moana look and vibe. Obviously, Maui, the animated character, kind of looked like Dwayne Johnson to begin with, so he really fits his role as well. And really, anyone the grandmother, the chief, everyone they cast for the main roles that had to be visually present, not an animated creature, did a great job, and they really did a good job casting that. Now we can get into it a little bit later, but vocally, I do think Alihi has maybe a little better vocal presence for some of the songs than Catherine does, although Catherine did a great job. Definitely some of the renditions, I obviously prefer the original music to the maybe this remake. Now, that being said, this is the second, I would say, and maybe I'm missing, I haven't seen every live action remake, but in the second movie in 2 years that's been a live action remake that has gone for the what I would call shot for shot approach. It is not a shot for shot remake. Neither was How to Train Your Dragon last year. But in everything important, they were. And you even think of Lilo and Stitch from last year. That one, a lot of people didn't like because they changed some major things. And even if you go back to some of the very original live action remakes, and it becomes a little hazy on what counts as a live action remake, but things like Maleficent, the original Cinderella, Aladdin, they changed enough. And some of that they have to because of runtime, right? These original movies from the animated, 2D animated Disney era are way shorter than like a normal blockbuster would be. And so they're adding a lot into that. This one is, I believe, longer than the original, but in terms of importance, all the important scenes are there. It follows the same kind of structure, and it's essentially a shot-for-shot remake. And I think rating these live-action remakes is difficult because do I think they need to exist? No. But because the stories they're based on, Moana is one of my favorite animated movies of all time. How to Train Your Dragon is one of my favorite movies of all time. These movies that they're remaking in live action have often, if they're done at least to some level of decency, have often the same story beats and heartbeats that the original did. So when Romantic Flight from John Powell plays in the live action remake of How to Train Your Dragon, I felt my spine tingle. I felt that feeling that the original gave me because it's the same story. And in a similar way, and this is especially true with the music, a lot of the music in Moana, the live action remake, is the music from the original. I love the music from the original, and it just comes back full force, and it's just really exciting experience. These live action remakes are kind of like seeing a band who's kind of a little more aged and kind of toward the end of their career, but you love all their original music, and you go to their concert and they might have some of the band members switched out, but they're still singing some of your favorite songs. That's what it feels like to me. It's some of the greatest hits, especially these musically important live action remakes. And I had a fun time. It's the same story. It's enjoyable. It's fun. Is it necessary? I don't think so. And this is where it gets really hard to review something like this, because if I'm going off of pure emotion, heartbeat, what it feels like to watch these movies, they're pretty not, and I'm not saying this for all the live action remakes, but especially the recent ones where they found, you know what? People like best about the original movies, the original movie. And so these live action remakes are just basically shot for shot remakes of the original movies. And sure enough, it works. People go to them and they're like, wow, they didn't mess with any of my favorite characters, but now I get to see them played by actual people. I think part of this comes from, especially in America, a lack of appreciation for the animated art form, which is, in my opinion, not great. I really love animation, and I think especially around the world, places like Japan, they respect it, and adults respect it too. And now they feel like, I've met so many people who will not watch an animated movie, And so these live action remakes are for them. And people keep saying, well, the live action remakes are terrible. Why do they keep making them? They keep making them because they do well monetarily. I mean, the Lion King lifetime gross box office, the live action remake was $543 million. And if that doesn't perk up, studio executive heads, I don't know what would. And so people say they don't want them, but then this is what they go out and support. If you really want more original stories, more original movies, you got to go and support the new original movies and stories. And the reality is people feel comfortable and safe, especially with the price of tickets nowadays at movie theaters. If I see, a new DC movie, a new Marvel movie is coming out, maybe in a positive way, certain director like Denis Villeneuve or Christopher Nolan that I'm comfortable with, I'm aware of their work, I'll go see that. And then for Disney, it's often like the stories. Yep. Oh, I've seen this story before. I know I like it. I'll go see it. And for the most part, they keep doing very well. Now, that is not entirely true with Moana. It is projected to lose $100 to $125 million. It's made $95 million worldwide in its opening weekend. So not maybe the opening they were hoping for. And this is kind of a common theme we're seeing people. Supergirl didn't do as well. Minions and Monsters. So this goes for superheroes, right? Superhero films, a little bit dying off. Sequels of beloved animated franchises, a little bit dying off. Not entirely true in the case of maybe like Toy Story or something. And these live action remakes. And people always think, well, this signals the end of this era. And, maybe it does on a broad scale, but they keep doing this. The amount of times I've heard someone say, this live action remake flopped. And then they make one that doesn't. Even that Lilo and Stitch movie that people did not like that much is the fourth highest ranked, or actually third. This list I have here is a little mistaken on one of the movies. So third highest ranked live action reimaginings. It made $423 million. That is a lot of money. So definitely interesting that, people will say, oh, it's doom and gloom, it's the end of an era, and then boom, it made a ton of money. So Moana may not make that much money. And part of this, I think, has to do with timing. I'm noticing that some of the best animated live action remakes that they do have, at least on the lifetime gross, tend to be movies later in Disney's 2D animation era. And so they're not the originals that are being remade. It's not the brand new movies that are being remade, but it's these like stuff from the 90s, early 2000s, I believe, in the case of Lilo and Stitch. Stuff where really the people who were kids then are now at an age where they would want to take their kids. That's probably the best thing I can think of right now as to explain why some of these really do well and some others don't. So really interesting, really not necessary. I would love for them to focus on more original work. The problem is people don't go and see original stuff anymore. And so the original work that they have to make for a lot less money, a lot less marketing then also, and then hope people show up, and versus these established franchises. And it's like going to see a concert of the, biggest hits of this band or whatever. People will go see it. That's just how that works. So hopefully that's not what they keep doing forever, but that does seem to be what they're doing now. I'm curious how 2026 will change movies, but because we're seeing this across everything, we're seeing this in superhero movies, we're seeing this in like Minions and Monsters, we're seeing this in Moana. The big headline for the last 3 weeks has been, oh, look at this, it's a flop, it's failing, for all these major 3 weeks in a row, major movie releases. And some of that may be critics' wishful thinking. Well, it doesn't look like it's doing well right now, but that might not be the lesson that the studios take in the end, and there will probably be more live-action remakes. I believe How to Train Your Dragon did very well, and How to Train Your Dragon 2, the live-action remake, is going to be coming out in the future here. So, not maybe the end that some film cinephiles would prefer, and probably for the average viewer, something that they're going to see again. So we'll see. But definitely, if there was a time to make a live action Moana remake, it kind of makes sense to do it now. We're at the potentially the end of the live action remake era, and a lot of the people involved in the original movie are able to come back. It was fun. I will say that. I think people who go see it are going to enjoy it. There's nothing in it that feels like, oh, they ruined this, one of my favorite scenes or one of my favorite characters. And there's nothing in it that's like, wow, this elevates it. This is where my test comes from, in that if I were making a curriculum, for my kids or for a friend, saying, you need to see these movies, I don't think I would put most live action remakes in there. So, and I wouldn't put Moana, the live action, in there either. If people want to see Moana, go watch the original. It's great. And the irony of some of these live action remakes is that so much of them is not live action. The live action Moana remake has a significant amount of CGI, like an insane amount, to the point where it's like almost like that Mary Poppins scene where there's a couple live action characters in an animated world. That's kind of what it is. And that's how, when they did live action The Lion King, the highest grossing one, it's like, is this live action? This is just more realistic animation. That's it. Now, the funny thing, I don't really like that. And actually, my least favorite live action remakes tend to be the ones focused on animals, like The Jungle Book, The Lion King. Those are the ones I don't really like, because I don't need to see all these characters reimagined into more realistic looking versions of their creatures. They're more charming as caricatures. They're more charming as these little two-dimensional figures. And if I'm going to make a curriculum, if I'm going to show someone The Jungle Book or The Lion King, I'm showing them the original. I am not showing them the live action one. I'll never feel the need to show someone the live action version. Now, that being said, I was talking to some coworkers this week, and one of my coworkers, she's a mom, and she was saying that her son doesn't like that old animation style. He prefers Lion King with the live action remake because they look more real. It looks more visually pleasing. To each their own. I'm not criticizing anyone here, but I did think that was an interesting anecdote of there are people out there who legitimately, and this is something that is lost on a lot of the cinephile community, that legitimately enjoy and maybe even prefer these live action remakes. So that is something out there, and that might be why they keep making these. Now, I will say something I did enjoy in this live action remake of Moana that was a little, maybe even a little better than the original animated one, is there's something in my heart that just gets so excited at seeing an ocean expanse, and especially the less CG that was involved, the more realistic of an ocean it looked like. Some of those establishing wide shots of a bunch of islands in an ocean or just a huge ocean, that's just really cool. And there is something in there. That's just a personal thing. I really enjoy great expanses of water. It's really beautiful, and I think they did that really well. And then on the flip side, they make Hey Hey, the little chicken, look like the animated Hey Hey. He doesn't look like a normal chicken or rooster or whatever he is at all. And Pua, the pig, looks like the animated one. It looks like they plopped the animated one from the animated movie into the live action one with just maybe a little more texture. It doesn't look like a real pig at all. So that is a weird thing that you see in some of these live action remakes. They love their fake sunsets as well in these live action remakes. They love fake sunsets in almost any modern blockbuster now, because what's more beautiful than just reality, I don't think there's anything compared to the awe of a real sunset and a realistic texture. And I will say my challenge for the live action remake community and makers is make it more live action. If you're gonna go live action, make it feel grounded. There is a level of distance in these live action remakes that feel like I am in an animated world. I'm not actually connected at all to the earth, to the ground, to the water, like I should be in Moana, right? I don't feel the spray of the water. And if you look at some of the old, even the fantastical ones, right? Like Pirates of the Caribbean, The Lord of the Rings, those are some of the most real feeling movies ever because, well, part of it's probably the the existence of film grain, but part of it too is there's a scene of Gandalf walking a horse, and it's a beautiful sunset behind him, and he's silhouetted by the sunset, and there's no weird glows, there's no weird like halation or anything. It's just a beautiful, beautiful sunset, and with Pirates of the Caribbean, you see the water splash over the side, and you feel it. Watching Davy Jones, looking at his face, and the way the light reflects off of it, it's like this is a real person, even though it's not, right? And I would love if live action remakes keep going on, which they probably will, to try to lean into some of that more grounded filmmaking style. Dune, we've talked about before, one of the most grounded feelings. And it's a fantasy world, but that desert feels more like a real desert, like wandering through, Jordan or the UAE than any shot in like Aladdin would or something like that. Why don't we try to, if we're going to make these live action remakes, elevate them to feel different? They're adding all this length to these live action remakes, which sometimes I will say does feel a little long. In Moana, I do wish it was a little choppier. The distance between these great songs, the highlights for me, was a little too much at times. I was like, oh, when's the next song coming? I'm very excited for that. So if you're going to expand these into more of an epic size, an epic length, maybe make it feel more like an epic, like a grounded Ben-Hur, Lawrence of Arabia, something like that. I don't know. Obviously, that's probably not what they're going to do, but that is just my maybe challenge to the live action remake community. I think that would be really cool. So, yeah, really interesting movie. I enjoyed myself, obviously, because I loved the story, and the story is what matters most at the end of the day. You can have a weirdly animated or, even some weird CG, but if a story is great, people will love that movie. An example of that, I absolutely despise the art direction in the third Harry Potter movie with the werewolf. He just looks like this scrawny little thing. And I get some people would like that, but that is just a personal take of mine, and that is something that I don't like from that movie. But the third Harry Potter movie is a great, Alphonse Cuarón did a great job. It's a great movie. It's beautiful. It has a great story, and I will keep watching it. It doesn't matter if I don't like a piece of art direction or some weird, effects. That's very true with even some of the, prequel Star Wars movies. While those might not be some of the greatest movies of all time, the overarching story of the original Star Wars saga is great. And even though some of those look like Windows XP loading screens, I still kind of like them and like the story and what they're trying to do in some of those prequels as well. So that is just the way some of this goes. But yeah, I'm going to like the story of Moana, the live action remake, because I like the story of Moana. I'm going to like the story of How to Train Your Dragon, the live action remake, because I also like I like the story of the original. So that being said, I would way prefer them to do endless sequels in the case of like a Minions and Monsters or Toy Story 5 than do live action remakes. What about Moana 3? I know Moana 2 wasn't that great, but at least Moana 3, it's still pulling the same audience. It might, and it gives them a chance to maybe tell a good story and sometimes tell a better story. Franchises do dip, right? Minions and Monsters got a way better critic scores than like the original Minions movie did. So if people are going to keep making these movies, if people are going to keep going and supporting these movies, I'd like them to keep trying different versions of the movie, right? We have so many Batman movies. Some of them are better than others, but every once in a while, someone makes a gem, and all those people who are like, why do they keep making Batman movies? Suddenly shut up, and because they finally made an amazing Batman movie. So that does happen, and that's just the nature of these franchises, these live action remakes, these animated franchises or superhero movies as well. Just endless remaking continuing on with these huge franchises. Same thing with Scream, with Star Wars as well. Any established franchise, I think they're just going to keep making movies, and you hope that some of them are good, and even if you have to wade through some trash as well. So that's I guess a little more of a talk about it on a whole, but there's not a ton to say about the live action Moana movie that you wouldn't already know or feel from the original, at least story wise. But there's some, I guess a little dialogue on what I think about live action movies, and in the case of this, through the frame of this movie, the live action Moana movie. I really liked it. I do hope to see Catherine Lagaia later. I think she did a great job. Now, that being said, I was looking at Letterboxd the other night because, and let me pull this up. What I'm about to do is I'd like to go through and think of what were some of my favorite live action remakes. What are the remakes that I felt like I may actually show someone in my little test, right? And one of them, I do really enjoy Aladdin, and we'll get to this soon, but Naomi Scott, who played Jasmine, I really liked her. Most people who watched that movie did really like her. And she was in The Martian, excuse me. She was in Smile 2. She's been in a couple things, but really not a lot. Not as much as I would think. I would love to see her in more stuff. I thought she did a good job with Aladdin, and I'd like to see more of Catherine as well. I think she did a great job in this Moana movie. So, it's a starting point. That gets them a lot of fame, and sometimes that turns into something, sometimes it doesn't, right? So we will see. But yes, I'd like to turn now to I was going to do a ranking of what are my favorite live action remakes. And as I was looking through it, I'm like, this gets very tricky because part of it determines on how you define a live action remake. So I kind of want to talk about the different kinds of live action remakes, what I think are kind of valid and which ones are maybe not. And so the first kind of live action remake I'd like to talk about is basically Cinderella, right? The story of Cinderella, even the original Disney movie is a retelling of Cinderella. You go back to the fairy tales. There's different versions of Cinderella. There's Cinderellas from all different cultures too. Vasilisa the Beautiful in Russia is essentially a Cinderella story, like Cinderella is in France, I believe, was the original one. And Cinderella has been told and retold a ton of times. You can look up a list of like Cinderella remakes. Okay, so like looking at a list of Cinderella remakes, there's obviously Walt Disney's Cinderella. There's the live action Cinderella from 2015 with Lily James. There's something like Ever After with Drew Barrymore, a movie I actually really do enjoy. It's a fun movie. Cinderella Story, Sneakerella, varying levels of how good it is. There's that Amazon Prime Cinderella from 2021. Did not get very good reviews. But there's a lot of different remakes of that story. And I do think a story like that, I don't mind endless remakes. It's a very small, short fairy tale. And fairy tales throughout history have been passed down, retold, repainted. I mean, you look at the amount of illustrations for some of these classic fairy tales. Different people had their own takes on illustration, and different people had its own takes. Brothers Grimm collected it a little bit differently, or collected different stories. When there was overlap, people like the Brothers Grimm and other fairy tale collectors collected the stories just a little differently, told them a little differently. And so I think it's part of the tradition that live action remakes, or this continuation, maybe some more animated remakes as well of Cinderella will come out. And I'm okay with that. It's a classic story. It obviously resonates with people on a whole. And we'll probably see it again and again and again over our lifetimes. And so I will say the live action Cinderella is actually one of my, if not my favorite, live action remake. It told the story a little differently. The things it added kind of helped, like, where was the father in Cinderella? Where was things that were kind of maybe glanced by or briefly explained in the original are like a little more depth in the live action Cinderella. It was beautiful. I think there is something, the original animated movie is great, but something about seeing the costume design. People, period pieces. People love costume design, all this stuff, right? And you're seeing that in Cinderella as well. It also gives people the chance to play with a story. And I know there's a lot of people who really hate like race swapping, gender swapping, things like that, right? But a story as old as Cinderella, no one cares if you do a different version of it, you know? I think the fairy godmother and like the prime one was some very flamboyant gay man. People just kind of will watch whatever Cinderella you make, and you can mess around with the parts and make it your own and tell it in your own way. And I think that is kind of cool. So those kind of live action remakes, I don't mind. The second kind of live action remake I do actually kind of enjoy is one where they bring in a lot of star power to tell a maybe more of a like a retelling rather than a remake of some of these classic Disney animated features. So something like Maleficent with Angelina Jolie or Cruella with Emma Stone. I think especially something like Cruella, where you have like an Oscar-winning actress coming in and just embodying a role in a different kind of maybe point of view, a different telling of it, and then it really justifies doing a remake, doing it live action with big star power, and also it's not the same story, and so you're actually able to tell something new, something different. And yeah, I also think Christopher Robin, that could kind of fit in here. You know, that was an enjoyable movie too. Ian McGregor in that one. And once again, like it's not a shot for shot remake of some of the original Winnie the Pooh movies. It's something different with the characters you already love. And I think that can be pretty creative. Maybe not making the best movies of all time again here, but something enjoyable and something that is at least justifiable to make into something live action. So that's one. That's the second type I would say. The third type I would call your shot for shot ones. This is like we were talking about your Moanas, your How to Train Your Dragons. I think there is no reason to have these at all, but they at least make me feel similar feelings to what I feel watching the originals. It's one of the things I'll watch it once, probably never again, and then always just watch the original, the one that made it meaningful and important, right? If I'm going and buying these out on Blu-ray or 4K, not gonna buy probably the new one. You know, would probably just focus on collecting the originals because there doesn't seem to be any purpose there. Whereas like, and that's once again, if you go out and bought a 4K for like Maleficent, that makes sense. Like you're getting a different story than Sleeping Beauty. So it is a different movie. And if you really enjoy Maleficent, have fun with that. So that would be the third type. And finally, I'd say the fourth type. This is the one that has probably the most flops in it, the most just absolutely like, why are they doing this? Why are we watching this? And that's the live action remakes that are like kind of the original ones, right? Where it is a live action remake of the original story. This is like your Aladdin's, Mulan, Lilo and Stitch, but they're changing something with it, right? Something changes in the story and people usually respond negatively to that. Now, of those, I have had a couple positive reactions. I would say, like I said before, I did enjoy Aladdin. I enjoyed Naomi Scott as that character. It was a fun live action remake, and I enjoyed myself. I know a lot of people my age who would actually rewatch that live action remake. Will Smith in that too, super fun. So, yeah, don't entirely hate that. Lilo and Stitch last year, I actually had a lot of fun with. Now, this is going to be, sacrilege, but I've actually not seen the original animated Lilo and Stitch. And that is also probably why I responded more positively to the live action remake than I would have for some of these others. But there is a lot of these, like I said, Lion King, especially the animated ones, Lion King, Jungle Book, they all fit in this fourth category. There's just no reason for them. And I don't like them. I don't enjoy them. And they're missing the charm of the original movies as well. So yeah, that's instead of doing a top 5, I thought I'd just list out some there. Definitely though, if I were to say like these are my favorites, I did enjoy Aladdin. I did enjoy Cinderella. Cruella is a good one to put up there as well. So definitely some ones I enjoy. None of these are really maybe cracking, top movies of top 100 movies for me or something like that. But they're enjoyable. I would show them to my kids. I'd show them to a friend. I would join in if someone was playing them at a party or something. But other than that, most of these don't feel very necessary. And like a lot of the critics, I do hope they start trying to tell more original stories. But I will say that does require the audience going out, paying for a ticket, going and seeing these original stories. You can still filter out some of the bad ones. There's usually early reviews will give you an idea if an original story has some merit, and they're not always true. But if you do want to not just blind buy some movie ticket or whatever, that is a possibility. But people have to go out and support them. The marketing probably needs to be a little better for some of these original stories. Make it something people actually want to go see, and people will go see it, right? So that's it for this podcast. Next week, I believe we're talking about The Odyssey, which will be very exciting. And I have seen every Nolan film up till now, so we will be doing a ranking of my ranking, at least, of the Nolan movies. So I'm very excited for that. Thank you for listening this week, and I will see you next week. Thank you.